Before the world knew her name, Elena Lewis was just a little girl standing at the back of a dim courtroom, her small hand wrapped tightly in her mother's trembling fingers. Her eyes, wide and hollow, stared ahead as a judge's voice echoed across the chamber. Her father, a man she loved more than anything, was led away in chains. Wrongfully accused. Forgotten by a broken system. That moment carved a scar into her soul, one that would never fully heal. Elena learned early, justice didn't always belong to the innocent, and silence could be a life sentence. Years later, she was no longer that scared child. In law school, she became a force, a rising star who silenced entire rooms with the sheer weight of her arguments. Professors whispered her name with reverence. Classmates avoided eye contact, afraid to challenge her. She didn't chase recognition, she chased absolution. Every case, every brief, every sleepless night was a step toward correcting a world that had once destroyed hers. The library became her refuge, and her mind, a weapon. She devoured case law like scripture, memorizing precedents, strategies, and human behavior. It wasn't ambition that drove her, it was obsession. Her rise through the prosecutor's office was meteoric. She was relentless, surgical, and unflinching. Crime bosses, corrupt politicians, smug CEOs, she took them all down with the same cold precision. Headlines called her the woman who humbled Wall Street and the sword of the courtroom. She never blinked. But behind her power, behind the icy composure and perfectly tailored suits, was a photo taped to her laptop, a faded image of her father smiling before everything was taken away. Every conviction, every win, wasn't about the criminals. It was about him. About the trial he never got. The justice he never saw. By the time she turned 37, Elena Lewis had become a myth. Judges feared her. Defense attorneys hated her. The public worshipped her. But the shadows she'd conquered were watching. Waiting. And when she finally brought down one of the most powerful tech billionaires in the country, a man whose empire thrived on human exploitation, it wasn't just a victory. It was a declaration. One that would change everything. She didn't know it yet. But the moment she slammed the final piece of evidence on that courtroom table, sealing the billionaire's fate, she didn't just win. She stepped onto a battlefield no one had warned her about. One where justice had no rules. And this time, Elena Lewis would be the one on trial. It began like any other morning. A crisp winter dawn. The city still yawning awake. Elena stood in her kitchen, dressed in gray silk pajamas, sipping her first cup of coffee as she scanned through case files on her tablet. The knock came at exactly 6:03 a.m., sharp, deliberate, almost polite. She wasn't expecting anyone. She opened the door. And just like that, her world collapsed. Elena Lewis. You are under arrest. They said it calmly, as if they weren't appending the life of the most powerful prosecutor in the state. Her mind went numb as they cuffed her. Her robe fell slightly off one shoulder as cameras flashed outside. Neighbors peered from behind curtains. Journalists screamed questions. She was shoved into the back of a cruiser like a common criminal. Her mugshot was on the evening news by 7 a.m. Accusations flew: fraud, bribery, abuse of power. Every headline screamed betrayal. The woman who once stood for justice was now its most shocking offender. The internet caught fire. Memes. Op-eds, hashtags. The public that once hailed her as a hero now dissected her downfall with glee. In a sterile interrogation room, she sat alone. Her hand still bore the red marks of handcuffs. Across from her, a young officer avoided her gaze. A folder lay open on the table, evidence supposedly linking her to a criminal enterprise she'd spent her career dismantling. It was laughable. And terrifying. But as the hours passed, and no one came to her defense, something shifted inside Elena. Not fear. Not despair. Rage. White-hot, seething rage. This wasn't a mistake. It was a message. A warning from the powerful men she dared to bring down. They couldn't beat her in court. So they rigged the game outside it. And this time, the jury wasn't 12 strangers. It was millions of online spectators, fed lies and doctored truths. She wasn't just fighting for her name anymore. She was fighting for every innocent soul steamrolled by a system that protected the wolves and devoured the sheep. And if they thought she'd stay silent, they had no idea who they were messing with. The courtroom was unrecognizable now. Once her battlefield, now her cage. Reporters lined the aisles. Former colleagues refused to meet her eyes. The prosecutor assigned to her case was someone she once mentored. And now, he stood across from her, lips tight, determined to bury the legend who made him. The charges were elaborate. Wire transfers. Anonymous accounts. Testimonies from people she'd convicted, people with every reason to lie. It was all carefully orchestrated, a masterclass in character assassination. But Elena wasn't broken. She was sharpening herself in the fire. On the stand, she didn't beg. She didn't cry. She dismantled the case like she had done so many times before, cold, exact, unrelenting. Piece by piece, she exposed the holes. The timing didn't add up. The witnesses had incentives. The digital evidence. Tampered. But the damage was done. The world didn't care about facts. It cared about spectacle. Outside the courtroom, protests erupted. Some still believed in her. Others wanted her jailed. The city was split. What began as one woman's fall had become a national debate. Not just about her, but about the justice system itself. In a moment of brutal irony, Elena found herself defended by the very type of public defender her father never had. Young. Underpaid. Brilliant. This woman, inspired by Elena's past work, refused to let the system chew her up the same way it had done to so many others. And together, they turned the trial on its head. In the final week, a whistleblower emerged, an IT specialist who had been ordered to fabricate the evidence. The courtroom erupted. The charges began to unravel. And slowly, painfully, the truth clawed its way back to the surface. But even then, the fight wasn't over. Public perception was a trial of its own, and Elena had to win that battle day by day, truth by truth. The day the verdict was read, the world held its breath. The courtroom was silent as the jury foreperson stood. Not guilty. Not guilty. Not guilty. Every word was a stone lifted from Elena's chest. But the scars remained. She walked out of that building a free woman. But not the same woman who had walked in months before. She was no longer just a prosecutor. She was a symbol. A reminder of how fragile justice could be, and how viciously it could turn on its own. She had survived the crucible, but it had changed her. But Elena didn't vanish. She didn't hide. She returned to the public, but not to prosecute. This time, she stood on stages, in front of cameras, in protest lines. She spoke of reform, of accountability, of the silent war waged in courtrooms every day against the innocent. She founded a legal network to defend those the system overlooked. And when she returned to that same courthouse where she once watched her father disappear, she didn't do it as a lawyer, or a victim. She did it as a survivor. As a fighter. As a woman who had stared into the belly of a broken machine, and walked out stronger. Elena Lewis was no longer just a name in the legal world. She was a reckoning. And the world would never forget her again.